Welcome to Polthaus Workshop's video series. This is the first in a set of 3 videos dedicated to electronic powered sharpening. This first video will cover the Worksharp 3000. The next video will cover the grinding wheel and a method I've hooked up to an electric or battery operated drill. And the third video will cover 2 belt sanders and a disc sander method. So as I mentioned, this first video is dedicated to the Worksharp 3000. It has a lot of positive attributes and a couple of drawbacks, and we'll get into each in detail. So let's get started. There's apparently something of a heated debate in the historical community as to who actually uttered the phrase, but credit is often given to Leonardo da Vinci for saying "La simplicità è l'ultima soffisticazione," or "simplicity is the ultimate sophistication." When sharpening stones are a very good example of this quote. They're very beautiful in their simplicity, in fact. It's just a flattened piece of stone against which you rub a piece of steel at a certain angle, and eventually you'll wear that angle into the steel. They're very good for a multitude of sharpening purposes. They're very versatile, just a basic sharpening stone. And because it's so simple, it's able to perform a lot of tasks. I really prefer hand sharpening, but sometimes it's just not efficient enough. Especially with a new tool or the first restoration of an antique tool, a powered method is often much preferred because it's so much faster to set an initial bevel. When I'm required to use a powered sharpening method, I do prefer to go the simplest route possible, which is why I really enjoy the simplicity involved in this Worksharp 3000. There's some gearing and a motor inside, which are a little more complicated than I'd like, but the overall operation and function of the tool is very basic. The overall basic picture of this tool is that it's basically a motor inside this housing, which turns some gears, which eventually rotates a glass wheel in a circle. There's an on-off switch and a couple of minor adjustments, but overall this is very simple, which is good, I find, when sharpening, because if it's just a basic spinning wheel, there's a lot you can do with it. As opposed to having a lot of permanently mounted jigs and fixtures, this is expandable, which is shown by the Worksharp company in a lot of bolt-on accessories. Right out of the box, this comes with 2 glass wheels onto which affix some adhesive-backed sanding discs. And you can see there's like a little plastic piece on the back of this pre-adhesive sanding disc. It comes with Norton sanding discs, which I was really excited about. Norton Abrasives makes a really high quality product, so I was glad to see that out of the box these came with the Nortons. These just stick right down to the glass wheels. It's real simple. The best way I've found to do this is peel off the back, find the holes, line them up, and stick it down to the wheel. It's super simple, which is really nice. And in fact, another benefit to these being so simple is that you could cut your own. If you had some regular sheet sandpaper, you can use either the wheel that comes with it or the glass wheel and use it as a template to cut out some sandpaper, poke a hole in the middle, and use some spray on 3M 77 adhesive and just adhere the sheets to the disc yourself. So you could then have a humongous range of grits and not be limited to what comes in the Worksharp packages. This is one of the packages similar to what comes in the original box. These are available just aftermarket through Amazon or Woodcraft or a lot of other woodworking retailers sell these. They're not very expensive to buy out of the box, but they probably would be cheaper to make yourself. It also comes with this wheel, which I have fallen in love with. This is the Edge Vision wheel. They kind of gave it a lame name, but what are you going to do? Basically what this does is spins around real fast, and you look through these holes, and you can see underneath the tool what you're sharpening. So the concept is that you would mount this in the tool. It spins around, and then you sharpen things like carving tools or wood turning tools that aren't necessarily a flat shape, so that you can see what's actually being removed. This works incredibly well. This is probably one of the better features of this tool. It also comes with sanding discs, perforated sanding discs, which are the same setup as the others, except that obviously they have these holes poked in them so that you can see through, but they adhere the same way. These would probably be better to buy in the package because cutting out all those little slots would be sort of a time sink. But it works really well for seeing things like a carving gouge. As you're sharpening it, you can actually see the bevel of the tool and see how much material is being taken away on the bevel. So if you're toe high or base high, you can tell if you're not sitting perfectly flat on the bevel. And I'll show a little close-up of that in a little bit. The only requirement I would add to this is that it needs some extra light. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate the Edge Vision wheel on the Worksharp 3000. To show how this works, I have colored the tip of a wood turning gouge. You can see it's a gouge. I've colored it blue so that you can see it easier underneath the wheel. I've added some extra lights shining down onto and both underneath this wheel. This helps to see what you're doing. There's no integrated light with the tool, which is probably a benefit because it would get covered in the iron filings from sharpening really fast and probably be rendered ineffective immediately. So I have mounted a sanding disc, one of the ones that came with the Worksharp, to the bottom of this perforated disc. The sanding discs are also perforated. This was the backer to it. You can see this kind of what the disc looks like. I'm going to flip it on. Okay, and immediately, even though the shutter speed for the camera is different, so you'll see some of the edge, you can see my finger right through that wheel. In real life, it works just like a car rim, so I can look right down through and I can see my fingerprints on my finger. So as we bring the tool up underneath, you'll notice you can see the blue coloring, and as soon as I touch the wheel, you'll see, there it is. I'm just touching the back of the bevel. Now I know I've covered the whole thing. So there we go. There. Once you get a rhythm, there we go. And the goal is to take off, obviously, all of the blue with one swipe, not move it around like I was showing. But it's nice because I can see exactly what I'm taking off, so I know if I need to move it towards the toe or towards the heel, so that I'm taking off an even swath of material on the bevel there. So there, that's pretty good right there. There. And just like any other sharpening method, I'd want to quench this as soon as I got it finished in there. But it has already put a nice sharp edge on this wood turning gouge. Now I'd probably take a dowel covered in sandpaper or my Spyderco ceramics and take the burr off this edge of this tool. But all in all, it does a really good job. And tighter radius tools are a little more difficult, but it just takes a little practice. It also comes with this little bar, which affixes into two slots on the top of the tool. There's one on either side. It just slides down in there and then tightens down with these little plastic knurled knobs. This is good for resting the edge of a tool against as you're sharpening against the top spinning wheel. You can also mount it underneath, although I haven't seen or used it in that method. It's a little cumbersome down there. But the company makes some other bolt-on accessories which use these channels as well. So it was really smart of them to put them on both the top and the bottom to allow for future expansion of this tool. Some of the current attachments that use this same hookup method that Worksharp makes are a knife sharpener, which is basically just a belt sharpener, just a short belt, which turns around the arbor here. It screws into the center, and the center spins, and then it has a little piece that mounts out here for sharpening knives. I don't know how well that works, but it looks like, you know, it's a basic setup for any sort of belt sharpener. They also have a wide blade attachment which sits up here for sharpening things larger than what the 2-inch ramp will allow. There's a couple of other new attachments which look very promising. Hopefully they've kept them simple enough to make them versatile. The other one that I really like is this honing wheel. Now, this was an out-of-the-box purchase, so I bought this from Woodcraft. It's basically just one of their glass wheels to which they've adhered some fine-grain leather. And I'll go through the setup process of this. When I originally shot the video for this tool several months ago, I was very skeptical of how well this thing would work, just altogether. I really was concerned about the rotation speed of the wheel differing, whether I was going to be able to get exacting angles or not. So I shot the original video with it with sort of a bias. I gave it some time and decided I really needed to reshoot this video because I absolutely fell in love with this tool. This is one of my favorite powered sharpening methods, and because of this honing wheel, it's actually one of my favorite honing methods. If I don't do freehand, either on glass with the sheet of paper that we showed in the honing video, or if I don't use the leather paddle, I'm on this thing. And actually, because it's so small, I can take this and set it right on the bench, right next to where I'm working, flip it on, hone the tool I'm working with just really quickly enough to take off the burr that I've gained, and get back to work. So it's very fast and very efficient, and as you can tell, I'm sort of in love with it. It just mounts on the same way the other wheels do. It only mounts on the top. You cannot mount it underneath, or the leather will get scraped off. That is unfortunate for keeping exacting bevel angles, so if you wanted to use the ramp for that, you can. But overall, it works really well. And for this, I'll freehand. You know, I can put this guide on here and use that to guide the angle of the blade. I find it just as easy to freehand this. You know, I'd freehand if I sharpened on the wooden paddle or my notebook paper and polishing compound method. So I just freehand on this. It's just as easy. It's quick to take some off the back, flip it over, and you can rock it from the back of the bevel till it seats on the bevel. And if you have a micro bevel, you know, if you're honing by hand, you're going to have to almost guess at that anyway. So, you know, just a lot of practice makes perfect. So fortunately, this works quickly enough that if you mess something up, you can start over and be finished in just about no time. So I do prefer to hand hone on this, and you can kind of get down on the side and look, but you can feel it seat just like you would a regular honing method. The leather is pretty fine grain leather. It's actually pretty decent. It comes with a little honing compound, which I'll probably trade out for my my white honing compound, and a little packet of white petroleum, which it recommends using to keep to allow the wheel to absorb the honing compound. You can use bar soap on these sometimes. In fact, some of the regular leather hones recommend using bar soap, but I'll just use what came with it because that's what they recommend. So we'll give it a try. Okay, it says to apply this to the surface of the wheel. Just rub it in here. Okay, so we've finished applying the petroleum jelly. We'll mount the wheel. Alright, it's on there tight. We flip the unit on. I use this really old set of buffing compounds, but you can certainly use this green bar that came with the unit. I really like this White Rouge, so that's what I'm going to be using. Flip the Worksharp on, and the directions say to start from the inside and work your way out, so no big deal. To apply this, you can see it. Great. So it went on well. Some of the overall basic features of this tool are that it's very simple in its operation. It's got a glass wheel that spins on here. That's one area where they perhaps made it too simple. It's only 580 RPM, which is good for most sharpening and honing, but it's not adjustable. So it would be really nice to be able to adjust that speed a little bit faster, a little bit slower, depending on the size of the tool and the type of steel you're sharpening. But 580 was a good compromise. I think they picked a decent speed there. The wheels mount by way of unscrewing this little cap, setting the wheel on, and just screwing it down tight. That friction hold is enough to keep it tight to the base as it turns on and spins. So you can see it's got just a basic on-off switch on the side, which has a removable cap for safety purposes. I usually just lock the door of the shop because otherwise I end up losing these things all over the place. It's got an enclosed housing, so it doesn't need to be oiled or lubed or anything. Imagine after a while I'd probably have to replace the brushes, but that doesn't seem to be too big of a problem. This has a metal casing. The Worksharp 2000 is the yellow model. It's much simpler. I think it's a direct drive, but it has a yellow plastic housing. The metal housing I kind of like. It seems to stand up to some abuse. It has this, I think it's a cast aluminum ramp on the side. And to see if you pinch this little lever, it's adjustable. So it's adjustable in 5-degree increments from 20 to 35 degrees, which meets pretty much all of the basic angles. That's another place where maybe a little bit more complication might have been nice to be able to dial in an adjustment there. But they've kept costs down and kept it simple and basic by just providing the 5-degree increments. And fortunately they chose good ones, and they're very accurate, so I was very pleased with that. Somewhere they got a little gadgety, there's a piece of sandpaper that sits on this ramp, and as you slide the tool up and down the ramp, it's supposed to remove the burr from the back side of the tool. It works okay. It's not really the magic solution I think they'd hoped for. And it's actually a little bit kind of a pain to replace. This is sort of an unnecessary feature, I feel, especially because you can have the glass coated on both sides with sandpaper, so it's just as easy to flatten the back on the top or to remove that burr very quickly. It is nice. It has an adjustable metal arm here. You slide the blade in and bring the arm to meet the width of your blade, and that keeps the blade from doing this as you're sharpening, so it helps to keep the edge square on your tool. And that works pretty well. It grinds fairly square as long as you're very careful. It is easy to get an edge out of square with this. It removes a lot of material very quickly, and if you're kilted just a little bit, it'll take the edge out of square on the tool. And for some tools that's not a big deal, but for some chisels that you'd like to keep accurate, that kind of becomes a pain. As you're using this tool, I would warn to be very cautious, because as the wheel spins, if you're sharpening from underneath on either side, you build up this sort of nasty detritus underneath. It's basically just a bird's nest of metal shavings, and they will catch fire. So I would just be cautious to clean it out every once in a while. I didn't realize it would do that. I was using the tool, and as I borrowed this tool, it started smoking, so I got really concerned. I thought, oh, awesome, I broke it. I had to buy a new one of these to replace, plus the one that I want. But it just was smoldering under there, so it was easy enough to clean out. But I would definitely recommend cleaning this either after each use or after every couple of uses to prevent it from actually catching fire and ruining something. Additionally, this unit is supposed to be air-cooled. So if you're sharpening from underneath, it's supposed to be drawing air up underneath the wheel and cooling the tool as you go, so you're not supposed to have to quench. I didn't have success with that. The tool still got hot. I followed the directions exactly, up and back to try to allow it some time to cool, and it just was not successful. So with any power sharpening method, as with some hand sharpening method, I would definitely recommend having a can of water, my reserve, just something to quench the tool in. If you are sharpening and the tool gets warm to the touch, quench it, or let it sit aside and pick up another tool. If it starts changing colors, you've gone too far, and at a certain point you will have started retempering the steel, which is no good. It's a pain to get it back to where you need it. So just be cautious on the front side. Once you have the sandpaper adhered to the glass, removing it is another story. Sometimes they come off nice and clean, sometimes they don't. This wheel is a perfect case of when they don't. As you can see, it's got a bunch of plastic left over from the back. As you're sharpening, this tends to get a little warm, and if you try to take it off while it's still warm, the adhesive has a plastic back on it which can come away from the wheel, the abrasive wheel. This is easy enough to clean off, maybe a little goof off or a Gooby Gone, and a window scraper like this one that I got at Lowe's. Just, scrape off as much plastic as you can without removing your fingertips, and then use a little goof off or Goo Gone to get the rest of the adhesive off. It's not a big deal, it comes off pretty quickly. You can even use a little Windex. I would caution though, there are plastic parts in this, so if you use a product like Goo Gone, be sure to clean it all off, as that product has a tendency to turn plastic into molten rubber, gooey substance. So just to avoid ruining your tool. Standard operating procedure for this thing is really simple. Start with a wheel. I usually put adhesive on both sides of the wheel. It aids in speed of sharpening. And you can do two different grit sizes, obviously, or you can do the same. On one wheel, I'll usually have two varying grit sizes for coarser grits, maybe like a 100 and a 150, or depending on the amount I need to take off, an 80 and a 150. And I mount those in. And on the other wheel, I'll have probably something a little higher, maybe a 400 and a 600. And they're easy enough to change out that I can pick sort of whatever I want to go through, all the way from sharpening through to honing and polishing. It's very simple. So this locks down on top with the bolt like we showed earlier. Flip it on. And it's actually rather quiet, which is kind of nice too. It's not extremely loud tool. And to flatten or lap the backs, you want to be careful you're either setting it down perfectly flat or start far back on the tool, much farther back than you normally would for hand sharpening, and rock forward. And then you can pull the tool back so that you're only sharpening the last inch or half inch of the tool, because you don't want to flatten the whole thing and waste sandpaper and your time. And make sure that you're sharpening with the direction of travel. If you turn it around and sharpen it into the direction of travel, you'll shear the sandpaper right off the wheel. That's especially important with the honing wheel, which has leather attached to it. You'll shear the leather right off the wheel, and then you're hosed, so you gotta buy a new wheel. Alright, so flattening the backs on this, move it around a little bit, and already it's starting to polish the back of this chisel. It's just super fast. It takes a lot of material very quickly, which is why I think it was a good compromise for the 580 revolutions per minute. The ramp, I forgot to mention earlier, handles up to a 2-inch blade. So you could handle some fairly large chisels or plane irons in this. With the wide blade attachment, you can sharpen up to a considerably larger blade. Although if you get into something real large, you're going to be sharpening into the direction of cut and away from the direction of cut. I have noticed this to produce an inferior edge. I prefer to sharpen only in the one direction with the direction of cut. So for sharpening on the wheel, on the underside of the wheel, we went over this. You would tighten this down so that you're not getting any wobble in the tool. You can turn it on. You sharpen from underneath, making sure it sits flat, a little bit at a time. In and out, in and out. And I definitely recommend checking for cool consistently. This is already starting to put a new bevel on here. You could just as easily do micro bevels. I don't do a lot of micro bevels on my tools. I'll get into that in a blog post in a separate video, and the entirety of micro bevels. But I don't use them a lot on my tools. Usually I'll just hone the edge quickly. I prefer just a straight one, but this is very easy to put micro bevels on with. Just one touch basically and you're done. You've got your micro bevel set. So if you're good with a basic bevel of say 25 or 30 degrees and you want to put a micro bevel on of 30 or 35, reset your ramp and just touch it once or twice to the underside of the sandpaper and you're good to go. Please feel free to post a comment below the video, either ask your question or feel free to leave your own experience with the Worksharp. Or you can visit my blog, which has a lot of other related articles. There's an entire page on sharpening, and there's new stuff coming usually every week. There's some new information posted there. The address is www.polthaus.com. Or you can email me your questions. There's a link on the blog to email me, or you can just send it directly to polthausworkshop@gmail.com. And feel free to check out the rest of the videos on the YouTube channel, and it's easily searchable through Polthaus on YouTube. So thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time on Polthaus Workshop's video series.